Thank you so much for that introduction. I really appreciate it. And thank you all for being here in Washington. I'm sorry it's cold. I wish I could do something about that, but I hope you will go get to see the cherry blossoms. That is an absolute must. You can tell your bus driver to drive by the cherry blossoms on the way to Capitol Hill. So, I feel like doing this work was decided before I was even born. I never had a grandmother. My father's mother was 15 when she was married, and she had a baby every single year until she was about, I guess it was 21 or 22. And she died giving childbirth to my father. So leaving 2 sons and 4 daughters alone with an abusive father. My sisters, my aunts, my dad's sisters raised him as well as his grandmother. And funny story, his grandmother always used to say to him, my dad, because he was very, very naughty as a child, that as revenge, she's going to come back as his daughter and give as good as she got. So, and every time my dad says, yeah, she's right. She did. My mother's mother was a very educated woman for her time in India. This is India in the 1930s. She had a master's degree in Hindu literature. So this was very, very rare, anywhere in the world, but in particular in India. And still, she couldn't get away from the weight of culture, and was married to my maternal grandfather with apparently not enough dowry. So my grandfather's mother, my great-grandmother, was constantly wringing her hands, constantly annoyed, constantly critical of my grandmother because she really wanted to have more dowry come into her family as a result of that marriage. When my mom was 7, my grandmother ran into the courtyard of their home on fire. She was ablaze, and my mom witnessed this as well as her death. The family story is that it was suicide. She suffered from depression, which I have no doubt she did. But I have to wonder. Dowry murders are all too common a practice in India, even today. So by the time I was born, the stage was really set. And I knew, I think, from very early that this was my calling. This is what I am here to do. I myself became a survivor of violence when I was 4 years old at the hands of my grandfather, my father's father. So violence is indeed an issue that spans generations. And it is an issue that unfortunately is all too much a part of our lives. I can guarantee that at least half of you, if not 2/3 of you in this room, know someone who's been a survivor of violence. You have a mother, a sister, a friend, an aunt, a daughter, and perhaps even yourself. Violence it's a silent epidemic. If anything else in our society was happening on that scale, that you could easily name someone who had that illness or who died of that disease, there's nothing else that would be in the press. there's nothing else that medical research would be focused on. It is of epic, epic, epic proportions. And yet, it's so normal. It's so given. We don't talk about it. We don't get mad about it. We don't do something about it too often. And I want to explore with you a little bit this morning why that is and how we change that. When there are things that we are told have been this way since the beginning of time, poverty will always be with us. No. Poverty is with us because we let it be with us. Because we let it. We give it an excuse. We give it a pass. We let the government leaders who are corrupt or despotic, we let them get away with holding their people down. Poverty is a political issue. It is a result of corruption. It is a result of lack of government focus. It is a result of the lack of funding. Poverty is evidence that on this earth, we are not yet making the right choices. Violence is the same way. We let it exist. We let it exist when we know our neighbor is harming his children, and we don't say anything. We let it exist when we know women are being raped in the Congo right now. Right now. Women are being raped by the hundreds every day, and there's no outrage about it. Violence costs our society an enormous, enormous amount of money. And finally, there's been lots of more research done by the World Health Organization to bring to light the economic costs of violence. A woman's wages during her lifetime are repressed approximately 20% as a result of violence. Sort of intuitive. She can't hold a job. She has to seek out extra medical care. She's concerned about her children and their safety. That has a direct impact on her ability to earn money. It also has an impact on the ability of companies to do their jobs, to have good productivity. We pay an enormous price economically for the violence that is endemic in our society and in other societies around the world. So as women's rights activists, we're hoping that if we put dollar signs all over the issue of violence, that we'll finally get some attention. It angers me that we have to do that. As if violence against women weren't wrong enough, I have to tell you how much it costs. It's kind of outrageous, but there we are. We have to make the case again and again and again that societies that regularly abuse their women are most likely to be unstable, poor, and harbor terrorists. It's true. There is a correlation. But when I go up to Capitol Hill and talk to a member of Congress about that, you may hear this in your meetings. Show me a study that says that. Okay, I'll show you a graph. Here's instability, here's violence against women. I'll chart all You know, okay, I can give you a study. Why is it that we have to make these arguments around violence? It's wrong. It's a sin. It's evil. It's evil among us. It's evil every day in the world. Why are we afraid to just name it for what it is? You know, if I'm lucky enough to have granddaughters, I have 2 boys. I'm hoping I'll get that girl eventually. It would break my heart to look into her eyes and as an infant and say, there's a 30% chance in your lifetime that you will be a victim of violence. Imagine saying that to your granddaughters. Imagine saying to an infant girl in Zimbabwe, there's a significant chance you'll be raped before your first birthday. If that is not the very definition of evil, then I don't know what is. So I am asking you now to call this what it is. Call it evil. Name it that way. And that is the first step for us to get the attention of our leaders who like to think in terms of right and wrong. They like to think in terms of good and evil. They understand the world in that way. Then let's put this to them in a way that they can understand. Have many of you read Nicholas Kristof's book, Half the Sky? You raise your hand if you've read it or seen part of it. It's a great book. It's really depressing read, but it's a great book. And I really agree with what he says, that women's rights, and particularly violence against women, that is the moral issue of our century. That is the liberation movement of our century. And if we get to the year 2100, and this is still a problem of epic proportions, if it's still a plague among us, I can guarantee you that the world that we will be living in then will be more destabilized than it is now. We will have more terrorism. We will have more bad consequences from natural disasters. We will have less economic stability. I can guarantee you that. There is no other more important human issue in our century. You may care about HIV/AIDS. Very important issue. New HIV/AIDS infections are highest among girls 12 to 25 in Africa because of sexual violence. That's the reason HIV is going up in Africa. So if you care about HIV, you have to care about violence. You may have child health, nutrition, child welfare as the issue that's closest to your heart. That's a vital issue. But when mothers are abused, those children will not fare well. It is the issue that's connected to everything. And again, it's somehow become like the air we breathe. It's just there, it's all around us, but we don't see it. So I hope that in your meetings on Capitol Hill, and that in your work, in your congregations, when you go home, you will begin to talk about this issue as the most normalized evil that we have in our world today. Tomorrow, you're going to be making an ask on violence against women, and for that I am very, very grateful. It took us many years to write the International Violence Against Women Act. We started by interviewing women's groups around the world. We interviewed 40 different women's organizations in about 10 different countries and asked them what they wanted. We asked them what would be the most constructive thing the US government could do to end violence against women and girls. And the answer they gave us was very, very simple and very smart. They basically said, don't come over to our countries and preach at us and tell us we're wrong and berate our men. That's not what we want from you. We do need your support. We do need your financial resources. We want you to support the women's groups in our countries that exist in the fabric of our own cultures to fight violence against women and girls, as well as to work with men and boys. I really believe that abuse does not only harm the abused, it harms the abuser. And we have to work with men and boys to prevent, to change the worldview in their minds that give women no value. So that was very important to the women's groups around the world. And the other thing they said, just sort of counterintuitive, but it makes really a lot of sense, which is that don't start a whole new violence initiative and a violence program in countries, which the US tends to do, and sort of open a shop and hang out a shingle that says, violence against women programs, come here. That's just not workable. What we want you to do is to deal with this issue on multiple different fronts. We do want you to pressure our governments to have better laws. We do want you to pressure our institutions to actually enforce those laws. We do want you to train judges in how to prosecute, how to judge, how to sentence these kinds of things. We do need your help building shelters. We do need your help with social change. But we also want you to do that as a part of every single program that your country operates in our country. We want violence to be part of what it works on. Microenterprise is one of the programs that has sort of been the panacea of, quote unquote, panacea for poor around the world, particularly women. And microcredit is a good program, microenterprise is a good thing. But when it's not really done well, in particular, when you don't think about the violence implications of microenterprise and you ignore the men in these women's lives, you can have a very negative impact on women by increasing the violence that they face in their households. We have to be smart about how we do our programs overseas, and we have to be willing to see reality for what it is and address it. So that part of it was also very, very, very critical to women around the world. Now, the good news is that those kinds of programs, funding locally based indigenous organizations and integrating violence into existing interventions, both of those things are extremely cost effective. So we're in a budget situation, which I'll say more about if you're not already sick of hearing about it, that we need to do things that are strategic and cheap. This is one. So when you are talking about the International Violence Against Women Act tomorrow, definitely articulate that this is not a piece of legislation that costs new money. What we want is to do all of our programs smarter, and we want to support locally based organizations. With $5,000, a local organization can hire a full-time staff person for a year. Our dollars go so much further when we put them to and through local organizations. The International Violence Against Women Act does some other very important things. And I'll say more about what's been in it in the past and what the bill may look like as it's introduced this summer. But one of the important things that it does is that it requires our military, as well as any peacekeeping operations that the U.S. government funds, which is pretty much all of them, must incorporate two things. One, adequate training for the troops, the management, the leadership on violence against women, and there has to be enforcement. So at a minimum, if peacekeepers or U.S. troops are engaging in violence against women in any form, there has to be swift and clear and strong consequence for that. Another thing that the bill does is that it requires the Secretary of State to go to Congress and in a public forum articulate to the Congress and Americans what our government is going to do when there is an outbreak of systematic gender-based violence. So Congo, Darfur, you could argue Haiti, same thing. It is of such big proportions that we have to have a response. Right now, there's no requirement to do that. We can just sort of go along on our way, throw a couple $1 million at it, and everything's good. So what this would do is create an accountability mechanism, and particularly a way for Americans not to be duped about what we're doing. The U.S. government we are doing things in Congo. We're spending, I don't know, roughly $20 million a year. It sounds like a lot of money. My organization is about $3 million a year. We're tiny. So 20 million, it doesn't go very far. Think about the operating budget of your churches. Generally, an operating budget is going to be close to $1 million, maybe 2. That's 20 churches. Oh, maybe not. Okay, 200,000. Maybe the mega churches are up there. But at any rate, it's not a lot of money. It's not a lot of money at all. And I think we as Americans can be easily pacified by saying, oh, 20 million is a lot of money. Okay, great, we're doing something in Congo. So the bill would really force a response on the scale appropriate to the problem. We almost passed the IVAWA last year. We got very, very close. We ran out of time in the middle of December when the Congress finally went home. But one of the reasons we couldn't get it done fast enough is because members of Congress did not hear enough noise from back home. There was too much silence. Would you come up here with me? Silence is a game. Silence is a game. So they won that round. We couldn't make enough noise to make it happen. And I know that it's going to take us several more years to make enough noise in a consistent enough fashion that passing the International Violence Against Women Act will be something that members of Congress are falling over themselves to do. It's a winner issue. I mean, who's for violence against women? I would have thought that Republicans and Democrats and everybody would have just been like rushing to the floor to get this done. I guess after 25 years of doing it, I'm still naive. So the bill that's going to be coming out over the summer, unfortunately, is going to look a little bit different. What we need to do now is to build a very good, strong, solid, bipartisan support for the idea. couple of the things that we ran into last year were that the aspects of the bill would cost a little bit more money. And we had a number of offices on the Hill say, we can't touch it. Costs 1 cent more, can't touch it. So we are going to restructure the bill so that it only includes interventions that don't cost new money, but that work smarter. So you can assure offices when they ask you, which they will, how much does this cost, you can say nothing. The other thing we're going to do is to emphasize the diplomatic aspects of the bill that don't cost a lot, but that sort of pressure other governments to do the right thing. So there will be pieces of the bill that we had hoped to include before that we won't be able to this time. But the idea is to make sure that we can have every Democrat and every Republican on the record saying this is an issue that our country should do something about. Then what we do at Women Thrive is we will take that support and your voices, and we will engage in the money process on the Hill, which all happens under the radar. And our goal will be to sneak in little bits of like 10 million, 15 million here and there into that legislation. But if we have an IVAWA out there that has broad bipartisan support, that makes my job so much easier in sneaking in these little bits of money. So let's talk a little bit about the budget. The reason that we really had a double ask for you this year for your Advocacy Day is because without money, without any money for poverty assistance, all of this conversation about violence against women is just sort of meaningless. So if they cut what we already have in poverty assistance, there's nothing to discuss. There's no HIV/AIDS, there's no child health, there's no malaria, there's nothing. So just to give you a real clear visualization of what we're talking about, this is the whole US budget, this dollar. Right? So about 1/3 of it, give or take, I know I'm ripping money, is our defense budget. About another 1/3 of it is what we call the entitlement programs. So Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, Children's Health Insurance Program. These are entitlement programs that are very difficult to change. And then you have about 1/3 or so left, which is what's called discretionary spending, which means this is the part that we really have to work with. So of the whole budget, 1%, I don't even know if I can cut it that small, but 1% is our international affairs budget. And this is what funds everything we do overseas, including our embassies, our consulates, our financing for foreign militaries like Israel, all the aid that we give to Egypt, Jordan, all of that money, including the poverty-focused aid, is in this little 1%, which is like a huge 1%, so just so you can see it. All right, so of that, half of it is, generally speaking, what we would call poverty-focused aid. So it's the maternal health, the humanitarian assistance, the basic education, all of that. So 1/2 of 1%. When I hear politicians saying that we shouldn't be helping people abroad, it's going to increase our deficit, we can't balance the budget if we do that, it makes me crazy. Because that's a lie. That is a lie. And they are telling that lie in a way that will cost the lives of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. What's in here is vaccinations for children and safe birthing kits for mothers. Girls' education, that's in here. And we need to explode this myth that somehow the U.S. gives 10 or 20 or even 5% of our budget to foreign assistance, and somehow that's going to solve our fiscal problems or even make an impact on them. If we cut all of this, we maybe will save 1/10,000th of a percent of the deficit and 1/2% of the U.S. budget. But the cost is so dramatic. Based on our calculations, 200,000 women will die in childbirth as a result of these cuts. That's about how many women get served every year as a result of our maternal health programs. All those great programs for Afghan girls to go to school, bye-bye, that's gone. So what I want to ask you to do tomorrow, in addition to saying violence is evil, plain and simple, is to also start exploding this myth that to say that we are going to make an impact on budget balancing or the deficit on the backs of the poor, women and girls, mothers, is a lie of unconscionable nature. I really want every member of Congress who says things like that and who may vote on things like that to know that at least make an informed decision. If you're going to cut this, you need to know that you are responsible for the consequences of that. That's what being elected is all about. That's what being in government is all about. This is not campaigning anymore. This is real. This is real people's lives. So that's your second task for tomorrow, is to help people in power understand the real, true consequences of their decision making. And this is one very, very important one. So I will stop there. I've asked you for a lot. I've shared with you a lot. And I really want to just have a conversation with you now. I'm interested to hear your thoughts. I'm interested to hear your questions. And I will do my best to answer them. So thank you. We're going to open the floor. All right. So we have about 15 minutes. Yes, ma'am, in the blue. For the International Violence Against Women Act, the IVAWA, we do not yet have a bill number. It will be introduced into the House by Jan Schakowsky from Chicago. Yay, Chicago! And Ted Poe from Texas. Anybody from Texas? Yeah, Ted Poe, he's a good guy. He cares about these issues. He's a former prosecutor and prosecuted a number of domestic violence cases, so he is passionate about this. And then in the House, it's going to be introduced by Jean Shaheen from New Hampshire. So what the ask tomorrow is, we want you to co-sponsor the legislation when it's introduced. So they can contact those offices that I mentioned, Shaheen in the Senate, Schakowsky in the House, and say, we would like to be a co-sponsor of the legislation when it's introduced. So that's very specifically what the ask is. Yeah. Yes? Yeah, let me repeat the question. The question is, will this act protect people both nationally and internationally? And the answer is not exactly. There's two bills. One is the Violence Against Women Act, which was originally passed in 1995. That is the domestic legislation. The International Violence Against Women Act, the IVAWA, is the international piece of that. So together, yes, they protect women domestically and internationally. But because the way Congress works, domestic legislation goes through a whole nother part of Congress, and then international goes through a whole other part of Congress. So it's difficult to sort of fuse the things together. Tomorrow your focus is actually on both pieces. So the question was, should we focus on just the IVAWA? No, the ask is for two pieces. It's to pass again the Violence Against Women Act, the domestic piece, and to fully fund it. And then to co-sponsor the IVAWA when it is reintroduced. Yeah, sure, no problem. Yes, ma'am. Ah. Yeah. Okay, great question. Great question. The question was, how is this legislation going to strategically impact the lives of our sisters in other countries? So violence is one of those issues because it is everywhere, because it's become part of our normal lives. We do have to work on it on a number of different levels. So the idea is to look at the legal issues, make sure countries have good laws on the books to deal with the enforcement of those laws, to particularly work on the social norm change, which are public education campaigns, campaigns that engage men and boys. I think some of the most innovative work on this issue is being done in places like Pakistan and India, where women are engaging male elders, particularly religious leaders. Let me just use this as an opportunity to say, people of faith are in a unique position to solve this problem. People of faith, we are our community's moral leaders. We are our country's conscience, in essence. And we have the ability to reach millions of people through our temples, synagogues, churches, congregations, etc. So one of the other projects that we're working on right now is to put together an interfaith alliance to bring positive messages about women into religious institutions around the world. So that's a very exciting new project, but that's an important piece of this, is the social norm change piece. And then there's a service delivery piece, so helping women after they've been abused, providing shelters, rehabilitation, reintegration into society. I wish I could say that this bill alone would solve it. I would be lying then if I said that. It's a piece, and I think what we see it as, what I see it as, is it's the piece that our country can do. It's the piece that our country should be doing. It's not everything. Yeah, other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Are there other countries doing similar types of legislation around the world?
No, that is what's really interesting. The IVAWA, the International Violence Against Women Act, is the U.S. will be the first donor country to adopt that kind of legislation that would basically have a very clear framework and strategy and goals around violence against women internationally. Other rich countries have their own domestic pieces, or they might be doing programs in their international aid. But no other donor country has looked at this issue holistically, which is kind of phenomenal. But the U.S. would be a model in that way. And we have had a lot of interest from the Canadians, actually, in this approach to our foreign assistance. So, great question. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I wondered if you could talk more about how the bill maybe addresses alternative options to sanctions and military involvement, which are both violent acts.
Yes, great question. One of the things that I often find on the Hill is that there'll be a really high-profile story about the woman whose nose was cut off in Afghanistan, or acid throwing in Pakistan. And the first response is, let's sanction that country. The problem is with sanctions is that the sanctions are always on humanitarian or development aid. They never sanction military aid, ever. So what you end up doing is cutting off the assistance to the very people that you're trying to help. So we've had to do a lot of education with Congress on that, and that sanctions are not the issue, but nor is military action. What we are advocating for is called the obligation to protect. That countries have the obligation to protect their own citizens from violence, and if they are not doing so, the international community has an obligation to step in and protect those citizens. So in the case of Congo, what that would look like are many, 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 many more peacekeepers on the ground. It would look like the US government not providing funding to military elements in Congo that engage in this violence, and we do. We do provide assistance. If it's not direct, it's indirect assistance to rebel forces in Congo. It would look like really helping and training women and giving them the ability to protect their own communities. You'd be amazed at, in some refugee camps, women, they organize themselves. Say, fine, nobody's going to help us. We'll help ourselves. We will set up 24/7 patrols. We'll work with the males in our families who will support us, and we will set up our own patrols around camp. We'll set up escorts to the latrines. We'll set up escorts to go fetch wood. Those things are highly, highly effective, and they don't cost a lot of money. If anything. So that is our preferred approach, is a protection approach that but also puts women in charge when possible. I don't think the solution is giving women guns, although there are some days that I consider that as an option, but that's not the solution. I wouldn't be from India if I didn't adhere to Gandhi. You don't fight violence with violence. Yes, ma'am, in the middle.
Hi, thank you. One of the things we talked about yesterday in Haiti workshop is about how funding can funnel down to these grassroots organizations. And I think we know that they're the most effective because they have the most trust in their community, et cetera. But what kind of questions do we ask our representatives tomorrow to put pressure on them to make sure that money is going down to those local groups?
Mm-hmm.
And what language should we arm them with to ask the State Department or whomever?
Mm-hmm. Great question. Let me repeat it for everybody. So the question is, how do we ask members to ensure that more resources are going to local organizations, or how do we arm them with the questions to ask the State Department? These organizations are called non-governmental organizations, NGOs, and we usually like to add the term locally based or indigenous NGOs. So that means those NGOs that are really grew out of the community, grew out of the society, and they generally don't have access to sources of funding. So many of our organizations have local affiliates, local chapters, and we're able to provide them financing through that fundraising. So they're also highly effective, and many of them are run entirely by people from that country. So, that's a piece of it, but what we're trying to do is really get money to the locally grown organizations. And so one of the positive things that the US government has done in the last year is started to collect data and statistics about how much money is actually going to local organizations. And USAID set for itself a target of about 10% to go to and through. So the most important thing they can do is ask ask how much, you set a goal of 10%, where is it now, what are you doing, how are you going to get there, etc. Yeah, yes sir, in the back. Yes. Yeah. So let me try to paraphrase that for those of you who couldn't hear. He was reflecting on coming back from a third trip to Pakistan and noticing that now, in addition to engaging girls in girls' school, there's boys' schools opening and engaging men and boys, and how can we support and connect those organizations. There's a wonderful international network called Men Engage. It's a menengage.org. And what they are is a network of organizations. I think they've got about 300 now that provide technical assistance, support, funding opportunities, information for this growing movement of men and boys institutions and organizations that are working with the other gender to increase their awareness, but also to meet their needs. I have to say that one of the things that I've noticed and heard a lot in Afghanistan is a lot of frustration from women saying, you're targeting the programs to us. My husband's unemployed. He's frustrated. He's drinking. He has, like, that's my problem. So that, you know, that we have to look at this holistically. We have to look at the family holistically. And we don't want to take women out of their families. That's not what they want. We want to strengthen the family as we do this. So Men Engage, great organization, and you can possibly link your friends to that one. Yes, ma'am. Sure. Yes. So she's asking about the Domestic Act and what you'll be asking your member of Congress for tomorrow. The Domestic Act is the Violence Against Women Act, VAWA. That act comes up every few years for what's called reauthorization. The Congress never likes to do anything permanently. They love to be able to, like, go at it again and again and again. So that bill, when it was passed in '95, every 5 years, it comes up for reauthorization. If it's not reauthorized, it expires, and that means that all the programs over these last 15 years that have been created through the VAWA and through its funding will end. So it's very, very important that Congress reauthorize the Violence Against Women Act domestically. So that's the first ask. And the second is to fully fund it, so that there are many shelter, education, rape, hotline, a lot of the domestic violence infrastructure in your own community, the hotlines, the shelters, those are all funded by the Violence Against Women Act funding. Yeah. I think 2 years ago, I think in the next 2 years, sometime in the next 2 years. The funding is an annual issue. The funding is an, yes, exactly. So every year we have to get the funding again. Correct. So the funding is annual, the reauthorizations are every 5 years. What it did come up in 2010, so it was reauthorized.
So we're not asking to have it reauthorized until 2015.
I think that's correct, but I could be wrong. Does anybody know? Does anybody have that information just so we can? Yes. You had a question. Anybody know the answer to the VAWA reauthorization schedule? Yes. Oh, it does expire this year. Okay. Okay. Yes, it does expire this year. There is a fact sheet in your folders that you can read. I am not an expert on the domestic side, clearly. But it expires this year, so it needs to be reauthorized. And it may be that it came up last year and they didn't get around to passing it. Yes, ma'am, in the back. Yes, the question was, does the International Violence Against Women Act address the impunity or ability to prosecute U.S. soldiers who commit acts of violence against women in other countries? Couple things. It does address that. Current U.S. law and current military law also addresses that. That is a crime in the military system. That is, you can prosecute with a dishonorable discharge, and then it can also be prosecuted criminally. So there already are very, very good rules or laws in terms of our U.S. military. The question is, are they enforced? Are soldiers informed of that? Do they know that? Is it tolerated? So there's the right words are there. Yes, in the back. Yeah. So the question is, in terms of the U.S. going into a free trade agreement with Colombia, does it make things better? Does it make things worse? How does that all work? Women Thrive Worldwide has also worked on the issue of global trade for about 13 years. And what I can tell you is that that is a space that is fraught with a lot of emotion, a lot of politics, and not a lot of good research. And so it's hard to know. In the research that we've done, when a country opens its market to goods from another country like the U.S., local businesses can be put out of business. They can. They can be wiped out by the imports coming in. However, in every trade agreement, including Colombia's, they have a safeguard mechanism where if it's going to wipe out a domestic industry, that country can use the safeguard and slow down or block the importation of goods from, say, the U.S., right? If they wish to, right? So it's, what I can tell you is that it's very, very complicated. And I think it's false to say there is a direct relationship between a free trade agreement with Colombia and escalating violence in the country. There are too many things in between to say that. There are also a lot of benefits from trade. It can create industries in communities and in countries that can benefit if it's done right, if it's done carefully, if it's done in a way that abides by labor laws and environmental laws. And some countries have in fact done that very well. Cambodia is a great example of that. They have done it very carefully and very well in a way that's really benefited their population. So in my mind, Trade is all about how you do it, not if you do it. And that's a place where the devil is really in the details. So it's not really a straight answer, but yes, I think that's our last question. Okay, 2 last questions. In the back and then over here.
If you found it's going to be a tough sell, I have a suggestion. Keep all the components the same, but change the title to the International Keep America Strong to Preventing Potential Terrorists.
Oh, that's great. That's great. We could make a great acronym out of that. Like, I don't know. IB smart or something. Over here. I like that. We're going to work with that. So, the question is, the military budget has quite a bit of aid in it, and does some of that go to education? Okay, so here's this crazy thing that's happened over the last few years, which is that foreign aid is so unpopular, but our military understands its effectiveness and understands its value. So we've slowly put more aid funding into the military budget to protect it. And now about 20% of our poverty-focused aid is delivered and goes through DoD. So the other thing that has happened is that the Defense Department has a lot of flexibility. So when they go into a community in Pakistan or Afghanistan and the community says, we want a well, they can build a well. We want a school, they can build a school. So it does go into education, but it depends on where they are and what the community wants. The irony of it all is that's the way development should work, right? We should go into a community and support what they want. Simple. So we're sort of living in this crazy world where the DoD is getting the money, but sometimes the way that they do it makes more sense. But then when soldiers are building schools with guns, parents won't send their kids to that school because they think there might be bombs embedded in it. So it's a very strange world that has been created over the last 10 years in the way we deliver our assistance. What should happen is that DoD should not be doing poverty aid. They have a mission. They should stick to their mission. The money should go through the U.S. Agency for International Development, and they should have the flexibility to meet the needs of people where they want to be met. That's what should happen. So, all right, well, thank you very much. I really enjoyed spending the morning with you, and good luck tomorrow.